Hey everybody, it's AB Stoddard at the Bulwark, and I'm back with my pal Bill Kristol, who is co-author of Morning Shots, also editor at large. And Bill, I'm back with you in the guest room at my mom's house. And the last time we gathered here was on June 27th, when Joe Biden melted down at the debate.
Look, if we finally beat Medicare.
Thank you.
So I'm having a little PTSD.
That turned out to be good.
A blessing.
I mean, if one hates to say it that way because it was painful to watch and unfortunate in some ways, but in many ways, I guess, but still it was a blessing, right? So
it just was so weird when I got back here. I remember that. But on to better days. We're at an interesting point in the race because we're so close to the end, 6 weeks out. But also, Bill, we've just watched the polling kind of, it heads in the right direction. It's Harris's momentum, but it's incremental. And she is making up ground with the Biden coalition. Exciting Reuters Ipsos poll has her 7 points up today, but the more important number, of course, because it's a national poll, is that she's 2 points behind Trump on the economy. He's at 43, she's at 41. So she is doing the work and breaking through, I guess, with voters on her biggest vulnerability and his biggest strength. And, we had the rate change, but the rate cut, but we really need to see that issue start to kind of be neutralized. I would think for undecideds to break her way at the end. She's giving a big speech today in Pittsburgh on the economy, positioning herself as a champion of the middle class. It's going to be specific about manufacturing, I gather, with some new policies. She's going to say that she's pragmatic and not bound by ideology. And she's going to say that for Donald Trump, our economy works best if it works for those who own skyscrapers, not those who build them, not those who wire them, and not those who mop the floors. What do you think she needs to do today and in the days to come to try to move those numbers?
I mean, if she is down 43-41 on election day on the economy, she will win the election. I mean, that number has been a plus 10, plus 20 for Trump against Biden. People retrospect.
It is in other polls.
Yeah, and it still is. That's what I mean. If it really is plus 2, which it's probably somewhere in between, but that would be excellent news. And it really means she's liberated herself from people's dislike, fair or unfair, of the Biden economy just to a considerable degree. I mean, that was the thing that really alerted Doug Sosnick, who then alerted me a year ago to how much trouble Biden was in or was about to be in. And this was before cognitive decline stuff really hit. It was the age issue was big. But the other thing that was big, in addition to the age issue, was retrospectively by about 10 points in a Wall Street Journal poll almost exactly a year ago, I'm going to say, voters said the Trump economy for his 4 years was better than the Biden economy for his 3 years then. And as Sosnick said to me, I mean, you can't really change. It's hard to change people's mind about that. That's their own view of their own lives and it's experience they've had. This isn't, do you think prospectively Kamala Harris will do X, or do you think there's a danger of dictatorship? This is, they have a memory, maybe slightly, too nostalgic and so forth, of the Biden economy. They have a feeling, a current feeling about the Biden economy. If Harris has liberated herself, if either feelings about the current economy have changed some, which I think is true because inflation's down and the economy's been strong. But also if Harris has liberated herself from that and is being judged more as, a candidate, a new candidate, that's all good news. So, she's run a pretty good campaign. I have my criticisms and I do things a little differently. But on the whole, she made up the Biden deficit. She probably got a couple of points ahead, 2 or 3 points. The idea that she's going to keep doing that was probably fanciful. I mean, she's going to keep gaining a point a week. That was not going to happen. This is not such a polarized electorate. And we're talking about very marginal changes, and there aren't many independents. And there are few swing voters who are uncertain, both well-educated swing voters who are torn on the, Harris is too liberal, but Trump's kind of a bad guy. And then even more uninformed voters, who knows what moves them, honestly. It's not going to be a long speech about, honestly, economics probably. But again, I think the final point I'll make is some of this, people overthink this. As someone, I think Harris is thinking of going to the border. Maybe she's not. I don't know. I haven't followed that. I know on Monday I was on TV and someone said, breaking news, she might go to the border. And is this wise? And I just said, who knows what she'll actually say? But showing that you care about an issue that the voters care about is important. Showing that you realize it's a problem. I was in 2021 sort of involved here in Virginia in the governor's campaign. but McAuliffe lost for various reasons. But one was that Biden, it wasn't just that inflation was taking off, it's that Biden refused to acknowledge that it was taking off. He seemed just out of touch. I mean, it just like people go to the grocery store and saying, "Ooh, look at this," and Biden went, "No, everything's great. We have the strongest economy in the, among the, compared to the European countries and so forth." And so, I think you get a certain amount of credit for just being in touch, and in that respect, talking about middle class challenges, housing prices, and so forth, I think will help her.
To that end, he is leaning more and more into tariffs as the answer to everything. And I really think there's room for her to work with that. She calls it the Trump sales tax. You and I have talked about how that's probably a little confusing to people.
Yeah.
I think, she just had these 400 economists endorse her yesterday. The Harris campaign is tweeting out Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell's comments yesterday where he criticized the tariffs, said he's a pro-free trade Republican and he's backing away. The tariffs, as I noted yesterday in my column, make Republicans very uncomfortable. They understand who pays for them. Trump seems to be the only one who thinks that foreign nations are taking a huge hit. So I think if she can find a way to talk about that and work it into her speeches about how you're going to end up in excess of $4,000 a year with him layering over levying these across the board tariffs on household goods, for 60% for Chinese goods, which we consume a lot of. I mean, I just think there's something there that's sort of a gift, and I'm hoping she, can tap it because there's a way to explain that to people, and it really puts Republicans in a corner. I just think that's like an opening.
Just on that, I very much agree. I think Trump's sales tax is just confusing to people. People pay sales tax; they don't know what she's talking about. It's going to be. I think just call it the Trump price increase or something like that. And but McConnell, for all that he's nominally endorsed Trump, which annoys me, I think is doing his best to undermine Trump, which is good, and he doesn't want him to be president again, in truth. And so it was good that he raised the tariffs issue. And it is a price increase, and she should hammer that. If you don't like the current price increases, and I don't like them either, she should say. But luckily, we got them under control finally, and the Fed has acknowledged that in a sense. And now Trump's just going to jack them up again. I mean, I think doing it in a very common sense, sort of straightforward way is a good idea, and I think it's a good issue. People don't mind tariffs, the name tariffs. The reason she went to sales taxes, if you test tariffs in polls, people kind of like them because they do think other people pay them, and they're sort of vaguely aware that Reagan and Biden and everyone else has used selective tariffs in ways to help protect, maybe sometimes reasonably, some sensitive U.S. industries. But obviously Trump's thing is a whole different level. So the Trump price increases, I think that is a good issue. And again, it cross pressures not all Republicans, but a certain type of Wall Street Journal editorial page reader Republican who has been, for whatever reason, has talked himself into a kind of crazed view of Harris's economics and of the Democrats, being like college demonstrators or something like that. And this pulls that person back a little bit from the temptation to vote for Trump, but a little bit of hard-headed economic reason why you should stop not go for Trump.
Look, Rand Paul is not a Wall Street Journal editorial page Republican, and he just introduced legislation to try to rein in the next president's ability to levy tariffs. So I think there's some space there to make them really uncomfortable. And if they could find a way on TikTok to do one of those Schoolhouse Rock things, like how a tariff hits you when you go to Walmart, and she can say on the stump, ask him his plan to reduce prices, and he will tell you that this is what he's going to do. And let me tell you how it's going to work. I mean, again, if someone can boil it down to a bumper sticker, I think it's good.
I'm impressed. TikTok, Schoolhouse Rock. You're in touch with the young people. You're really
how a bill becomes a law.
Yeah, they need you. They need you on the Harris campaign as the consultant for getting to the 18 to 29-year-olds.
I just dated myself so badly by saying Schoolhouse Rock, and of course, I thank you for pointing that out. I think the kids would have trouble Googling Schoolhouse Rock. It might not even be on the internet, but that aside, they could work with that and find a way to simplify this and amplify the message. And I think it would be good. She did not choose Bill Kristol's location, the Detroit Economic Club, but she chose Pittsburgh. She's leaning into Pennsylvania. We are expecting 3 new polls out from Pennsylvania today, which is exciting. So she's leaning into the Rust Belt, knowing that it looks like she has a good path in the Rust Belt. He's doing better in the Sun Belt. It's not what we expected, Those states are more diverse. She's having trouble with Black and Latino voters, non-college, I guess, in the Sun Belt, who are hardest hit by inflation. But if she can hold the Rust Belt and Omaha, things are looking good. What do you think? She's made some moves the last couple of days that surprised me. Like you said, if she goes to the border, I don't know if that's going to work. She's skipping the Al Smith dinner. I couldn't believe she invited some like pushback from Cardinal Dolan. I was surprised by that. Like, this isn't Jason Miller in the Trump campaign, but I'm going to read to you what he said. We're disappointed. We were looking forward to giving the vice president an enthusiastic welcome, and we were confident that she would find this. You know, she speaks very much about high ideals and how it's good to get away from division and come together in unity and all. That's what the Al Smith dinner is. And then he says that this hasn't happened in 40 years since Walter Mondale lost the election to Reagan, who won 49 of 50 states. So that's a big diss. She is going to interview with MSNBC tonight, but she went out on this limb on the filibuster also, saying she would do a carve out to eliminate the Senate filibuster to codify Roe v. Wade, and that prompted Joe Manchin to say he can no longer endorse her. So I was just surprised, because she's a cautious one, about these things what all happened in the last 36 hours. What do you think she's trying to do, and what risks are worth it? Like, do you want her to go to the border? What's your feeling on that?
So they're each different. And this is what happens in campaigns. You know, at some point, stuff starts to happen. You get asked questions. Even if you're ducking a lot of interviews, your staff gets asked questions. You get invitations. You either say yes or no. It's an issue. So this is more like a normal campaign. In a certain way, we had a weird couple of weeks where she really controlled the narrative and gave speeches. Trump gives his occasional rally speeches and tweets his outrageous things. And this is a little more like a normal back and forth. So a lot of it will fade away, obviously. But I mean, my quick answers are, yes, I think she should go to the border, probably. I mean, I just think showing that she realizes it's a legitimate issue for people to be worried about, maybe saying a word about how not everything went the way we hoped early on in the Biden-Harris administration, but we're very committed and things are improving, committed to having a secure border. That might go some way. I'm not sure that's the right thing to do. I wouldn't, so to speak, junk every other plan I have to do it, but I think it's something. I think the Al Smith dinner is a mistake, and she should change her mind. I mean, it's just silly. She doesn't want to appear with Trump. I don't want to appear with Trump either. Trust me. I mean, I understand that. She's a little nervous about abortion being an issue there, and she's pretty, far out on the other side of that. And so, but that's already the case. If you are a super committed pro-lifer, you're going to have real problems with Harris. And so I think Cardinal Dolan's basically right. She would have, as my friend Mike Murphy said to me the other day, I mean, every talented, gag writer, joke writer in Hollywood would volunteer to do her material for the Al Smith dinner. I mean, it's like 8-minute speech or something like that, of which 6-7 minutes are jokes, and then a minute is a nice talk about tolerance or civility or something. She could do the tolerance thing pretty well, and I think she could indirectly go after Trump on that. He is not an example of what Al Smith stood for, which was not demonizing minority groups or groups that have been historically disfavored, such as Catholics. And Al Smith was the victim of this in 1928, and she could do that without mentioning Trump. But for the serious 2 minutes of her speech, so she should reverse herself and go to the Al Smith dinner, I think. I'm not a fan of the filibuster, so I'm sort of much less upset than some of these moderates who love the filibuster. I think it's actually contributed to polarization in certain ways, but that's a more complicated issue. But look, I think on the abortion rights issue is so powerful. She's right to lean forward on that. I mean, she cannot have the position that I'm committed to. This is an outrage. It's an unbelievably fundamental infringement on people's rights. And if 2 senators don't want to do it, and we can't get to 60, if a few, we need a supermajority to change this. I'm sort of with her. Having said that, since Republicans are likely to control the Senate, I don't know that she can get anything to the floor. She doesn't need to break a filibuster. I'm not sure she can get 51 votes for it. And so I don't think, and who knows about the House. So I'm doubtful that it matters much. So I don't know. I'm not sure I would have picked that issue to fight on, but I don't think it hurts her, and I don't think Manchin has any clout anywhere. So again, these are tough. Some of these are 55-45 tactical decisions, honestly, and I don't know that she's got some consistent thing in mind about how to make them all. I'd say the consistent thing she has in mind is to be moderate, patriotic, and appeal to centrist voters. I think she's done a good job of that. That's why the Al Smith thing really puzzles me. I mean, honestly, I do think they will use that against her in Western Pennsylvania and in Michigan, Wisconsin. As you say, she's doing a little ahead in those states. So I'm a little bit contrarian on that. Just one word on that. I think she has a good shot in North Carolina. And I think actually she can win, without Pennsylvania. If she wins North Carolina and Nevada, I wouldn't plan on that. It's better to win Pennsylvania, assuming she has Michigan and Wisconsin. But I think Robinson is a big problem for Trump in North Carolina. So she has a couple of paths, and that's good. And she's in a little bit better shape than Trump. Trump's people super confidently, you remember this at the Republican convention, were saying, we just need to win Georgia and Pennsylvania. And those are both, in theory, doable. And we don't need to even, she needs to win everything else. Everything. She needs to win. We only need 2 states to get to 270, which was true if he didn't lose North Carolina. But that's interesting to me. I mean, North Carolina has really come on the map in the last 2 months. The Trump people were not thinking of that as a real swing state, just the kind of closest state they had in their pocket, so to speak. And that, I always believe in campaigns, the momentum matters a little bit. If some state starts to emerge, it often continues to emerge. This was Georgia in 2020, really, And I think that's the one state where we've seen not just very tight, static polling, really, but actual movement towards Harris.
You're right. I really like your idea about the border. I didn't want her to go because they will make such hay on the other side about it. But I think you're right. It's an opportunity to distance herself from Biden and definitely sort of say this, didn't whatever work the way we had hoped. I think there is a way, I think, to shift it to her advantage. Interesting about the dinner, the winner of the Catholic vote has always won the presidency. Trump's ahead with Catholics. Whatever, it is complicated. I'm worried that you think it'll hit her in some of those states and that they could take advantage of that. That's a problem. Also, hey, she absolutely mopped the floor with him in a debate. Why wouldn't she want to show up and like you said, she'll have the best jokes. She'll deliver them very well. She'll say something unifying and centrist, and it'll go bouncing around the internet. It just seems strange, like she's paralyzed with caution. But in North Carolina, Republicans are going to make the argument that this is not, or whatever. A lot of pundits are making the argument that this Mark Robinson thing just doesn't matter because North Carolinians are ticket splitters and they vote for Trump and then they vote for Roy Cooper and whatever. They don't care. And they're just going to vote for Trump and not vote for him. I'm kind of hoping they can use him and Herschel Walker and others and sort of just to make a direct appeal to Black voters there who maybe weren't interested in voting and say, this is MAGA. This is who they are. They run people in a cynical way without doing any due diligence on their background. They don't care if they're hypocrites or they beat their wives or they call themselves Nazis. This is MAGA. And it kind of ties together, right, what you have talked about, that James Carville's talked about, that MAGA is very unpopular, more unpopular than Trump. But this is really the party, right? If he kicks off tomorrow, this is who they are. They want Mark Robinson. They pick him in the primary. What are your thoughts on that? Sort of trying to find a way to use it. It's like the Harris voters are already coming to the polls, right? I'm just thinking maybe there's a way to peel off sort of energize new people in North Carolina with the Mark Robinson message. Or do you think the Mark Robinson thing dampens turnout for Republicans? Like, what's your thinking on what he does?
I mean, a little of each, but I think it is useful. I think tying MAGA around Trump's neck is useful in all kinds of ways, whether it's the intolerance and bigotry of MAGA, whether it's the craziness of MAGA in the Mark Robinson way, whether it's Project 2025, which Trump is pretending he doesn't know anything about.
I have nothing to do with Project 2025. That's out there. I haven't read it. I don't want to read it purposely. I'm not going to read it. This was a group of people that got together. They came up with some ideas, I guess some good, some bad.
I mean, it cuts against the grain for me personally, and I guess for you and the rest of us at the Bulwark. Trump is a threat. And it's kind of bizarre to sort of try to say, well, it's actually worse than you think. I mean, Trump's bad enough. We don't really need to put anything else around Trump's neck. But that's the voters, unfortunately, not quite enough of them are there on Trump himself. And look, if it's easier for them, I'll put it this way, if it's easier for them to see how dangerous and how repulsive so much of MAGA is than it is of Trump personally, because Trump personally is a pretty good con man and a pretty good showman and a pretty good demagogue and a salesman, et cetera. If it's easier for them to see the threat in J.D. Vance or Mark or Robinson or in Tucker Carlson or in, God knows all these other characters, fine. And I do think it has an effect. So I think it can help in North Carolina. There's a sort of swingish, again, Wall Street Journal readers in the Charlotte suburbs who maybe look, I don't want to vote for Robinson. Maybe I don't even need to vote for Trump. I'll just stay home. So a little bit of that. And then, as you say, to motivate other voters to come out, and not just, and some young blacks, but also women. Robinson's a fanatic on, of course, it's paid for an abortion, but he is nonetheless a fanatic on the abortion issue and so forth. Yeah. And so I just think all that stuff, everything adds up. Who knows what makes a difference? But you're talking about half a point. So anything helps. I don't think these things, people are a little too state specific on these things. Sometimes I am too. It's not like voters outside North Carolina couldn't look up and read something about Mark Robinson and think, geez, that party's kind of crazy. This guy, fine, the Republican Governors Association has pulled its funding for him, but they haven't, Trump is still endorsing him. And most of the other governors haven't officially unendorsed him exactly. Kemp did in Georgia because he's smart. And, but that shows to me that Kemp understands that people in Georgia see what's happening in North Carolina. And if people in Georgia think, gee, that's kind of the Trump Republican Party, it could hurt, right? So again, each of these things adds up. I say with Al Smith, incidentally, I don't know. I'm not Catholic. You're not Catholic. I don't believe. No. But and we're from New York, so we're probably a little too, think the dinner's more important than it is, because it's sort of a big deal in New York. But nonetheless, it is a kind of story nationally. It's not just Al Smith's a presidential candidate, a governor, not just a Catholic. There are a lot of Catholic, bishops and all this, and cardinals at this dinner. But it is kind of a civility and tolerance and, ritual of the presidential campaign thing, in addition to being a Catholic thing. And so I think, as you said, that just conveying the kind of good nature and I'll come here and to be funny and make some self-deprecating jokes, but also make the serious case for tolerance for all groups. I think that's real. And the Catholic Church has been good on the Haitians, I think, right? They've spoken up, at least in Ohio. Some of the Catholic bishops have spoken up on that issue against the anti-immigration stuff and the real demonizing of immigrants and immigrants, and vulnerable immigrant groups of immigrants. So anyway, I hope she reverses on that.
Yeah, now you've really got me in a frothing lather. I know. I just feel like this immoral criminal scoundrel is going to show up at that dinner by himself, and she's going to cede the ground to him. It's just outrageous, right? What's the point? It's just I think it's paralysis, but I don't know. Now it's going to bother me. But to your point, I think it's true that look, Mark Robinson is MAGA. You could tie together Doug Mastriano and Don Baldock and, all these people, Blake Masters and Carrie Lake, and people know who they are. In the right states, right? And make the case that they're radicals and they're dangerous and they're nutty as all get out. And they're on message boards, being anti-Semites and Holocaust deniers. And it's really scary. Anyway, she's awash in money, and surely some super PAC, can work on that kind of stuff that the campaign doesn't want to touch. Last thing, before we leave, what's interesting is the Democrats are worried that Senator Tester's going to go down in Montana. It looks like he really probably will. It's a different situation than Sherrod Brown in Ohio. These are the last of the red state Democrats. Manchin is retiring. We're not going to see a Democrat in West Virginia, but Ohio and Montana look different. And it just looks like where Brown can hold on, Tester can't. So they are looking at polls and feeling good enough to invest resources in Senate races. This is not Harris winning Florida and Texas, but into Colin Allred's race in Texas and Debbie Perskel. She has two last names, and I apologize. She's running against Rick Scott. But what do you think about that? Again, it's just like they have so much money that they think they're going to build a Senate firewall. But do you think that there's hope? I listened to a Sarah Longwell focus group from the weekend, and those Texas voters, they remember the Cancun thing, and they really can't stand Ted Cruz. What are your thoughts on whether or not we can get excited about the Texas Senate race?
I was in Texas after we did the Bulwark event in Dallas, and then in Austin for the Texas Tribune Festival. So this was both moderate liberal, anti-Cruz crowds. But Yeah, I don't think it's out of the question. I mean, I think O'Rourke lost to him by 1.5 or something in 2018. I don't know. I mean, that doesn't strike me as an incumbent who's totally safe. It's a huge state. People are very pessimistic about it at the presidential level, and not pessimistic, just assume that it's going to end up -5 or something like that, as it did in 2020. But it could end up -3, and then Allred's a moderate candidate, an attractive candidate. So look, if one advantage of having all this, people talk a lot, right? Raise all this money. Then campaigns promptly, in my opinion, often end up wasting some of it in the sense that Pennsylvania's key. So we're going to, instead of spending, $100 million in Pennsylvania, we're going to spend 150. Well, the marginal return for that last 50 is like zero. At some point, the saturation is just saturation, Whereas I would say that, and this is, Harris should focus on the 7 states, but for the super PACs, for the other groups, spending some money in Texas or in Florida is not crazy. You might get lucky. What if one of these states, Cruz or Scott, makes some mistake 10 days out, says something, or something turns up in his background, that is pretty embarrassing. And then you didn't spend the money to get within a point or two, and then you don't make it, So I think it's worth it. I do think Montana looks tough. I think Brown can hang on in Ohio, but I wouldn't give up on the Senate. It's these races, the country is now, these states, I mean, Florida and Texas, Florida was a Democratic state until, the Democratic state, it was a state that Obama won twice. And, and we thought Clinton, might win in 2016 and even Biden in 2020. Texas has been the opposite story, more a Republican state, trending a little bit Democratic. So yeah, I'm for, if you have the money, I would invest it there on the Senate side. And again, it might be some spillover on the presidential side and a real outside shot, though. I think that's if Trump's losing Florida or Texas, he's already lost probably all the 7 swing states. So yeah.
Okay, so this is my last question. You have been bullish on the Senate races in the swing states where the Democrats are well ahead. So let's review: Pennsylvania incumbent, Wisconsin incumbent, Michigan open, Arizona open, and Nevada incumbent. 5 battlegrounds where the Democrats are well ahead of the Republican candidate. Everyone thinks those are going to tighten at the end. Do you think that they're going to tighten, or do you think that they're well ahead? Because, I want to believe they're well ahead and that's going to, portend well for Harris. But most people looking at those races and saying, no, it's not a Republican candidate quality thing. Those races are going to tighten up at the end and be really close. What do you think?
I don't know. Sometimes they tighten. Sometimes they actually widen, Shapiro in Pennsylvania in 22. I mean, presumably in a presidential year, if you have a very close presidential race, there's enough straight ticket voting that it sort of drags the down ballot candidates towards parity, if you want to think of it that way. If you have a presidential race that's 50-49, it's kind of more likely that the Senate race will get closer. But I think the incumbents have their own brands, if you couldn't use that term. I mean, those are people who've won many times statewide in some cases, Casey in Pennsylvania and even Brown in Ohio. So that's a little different. Slotkin, not so much in Michigan. That one I think could tighten, but she's been ahead. I think the Democrats are in pretty good shape in those races. And it does tell me a little bit, and you see this in some of the generic polling too, that congressional polling. I don't know. It feels like the country's in a slightly pro-Democratic Party mood. I mean, and this has been true since Dobbs. I mean, that there's just it feels, you look at the generic congressional, you look at some of these, Slack and Rogers would seem to be like a very, 2 people who've been members of Congress, both acceptable, you might say, to mainstream voters. She's ahead by 3 in Michigan. Maybe she should be ahead by a little more, but it feels like that's where the race, that's where the state wants to be, so to speak. And if Michigan wants to be +3, Pennsylvania might end up +1 or 2, and I feel like Democrats have a decent shot in some of these, at the presidential level, actually, but also in the Senate level. And also some congressional races would have this character that, at the end of the day, they kind of sort out in a way that might help the Democrats. Helps if you have a scandal or two, which I guess now this Republican candidate in Long Island has, putting his mistress. I couldn't quite follow it. The mistress and the fiance's daughter, they're separate people. Both of them on the payroll. It's very even-handed of him, really, I think, very impressive. So
once I saw mistress and fiance's daughter in the same headline, I decided it was actually just too scandalous for me to even read about. Okay, well, Bill, it is interesting that she's polled better in Pennsylvania recently than the national lineup. So like sometime, I mean, Pennsylvania is just looking brighter than I thought it would now. And so I'm very excited about these three polls out today from Pennsylvania. For our political nerds, everyone should take a look at a New York Times story today called Republicans' Electoral College Edge. Once seen as ironclad, looks to be fading. So that's interesting about the fact that Kamala Harris might not need to be as far up in the national polling to win the Electoral College. And this is ball game here. So Nate Cohn has that up for you on the New York Times. Everyone should take a look. Bill, thank you so much. We'll be back next Wednesday. Everyone keep it here on the Bulwark's YouTube channel all day long. We have new stuff happening all the time. Subscribe. We'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks.